Part 10. The Country That Vanished. They say the hardest part of losing someone is not the moment they disappear. It's the moment you realize the world has learned to live without them. For Sudan, that moment came quietly. There was no headline, no breaking news alert, no global emergency broadcast. Just silence. A silence so deep that even the dead could hear it. For the first time in modern history, a country began to vanish without leaving a trace. Not all at once, but piece by piece. A village burned here, a town emptied there. A road overtaken by bandits. A border closed without announcement. A river crossing swallowed by war. On international maps, Sudan still looked the same. The borders were drawn. The capital was labeled. The rivers were blue and flowing. But on the ground, none of it was real anymore. Khartoum was a skeleton. Darfur was a wound. Kordofan was a battlefield. The Nile was a dividing line between two collapsing worlds. It was a country in name only, a memory painted on a globe. Then came the year when Sudan stopped speaking. Telecom towers collapsed. Electricity grids died. Internet lines were severed, swallowed by fire, or cut deliberately to hide the ongoing massacres. Sudan's voice, once loud, once vibrant, once full of music, poetry, and argument, faded into nothing. Families inside the country could not reach each other. Diaspora could not call home. Aid workers heard only static. Journalists waited for messages that never arrived. Entire months passed where the world had no idea who was alive. It was the first modern blackout of an entire nation. In a refugee camp in Chad, a man held his phone to the sky for hours every day, even though he knew the truth. There was no signal. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe never again. With no cameras, no reporters, and no satellites able to track every corner of the conflict, a new kind of war emerged, the invisible war. It lived in back alleys and abandoned fields. It hid inside forests and wadis. It whispered through nighttime raids and silent executions. There were no videos, no witnesses, no evidence. Only rumors, carried by survivors who ran through the desert with nothing but their eyes and the truth. A woman in West Darfur said, "They came at sunset. When we woke up, half the village was missing. We will never know where they went." A teenage boy added, "It feels like we are dying in secret." It was a war designed to erase people rather than defeat them, a war built on disappearance. By now, Khartoum had transformed into a maze of shifting front lines. No street was safe. No building belonged to the same group 2 days in a row. No neighborhood kept the same name. Gunfire echoed like breathing, constant, rhythmic, unsettling. Stray dogs roamed highways searching for scraps. Palm trees stood guard on the empty avenues, their leaves shaking under the weight of distant explosions. Abandoned cars lined the streets like metal fossils. Homes that once held life now held shadows. A young man who returned to check on his grandmother's house whispered, "I walked down my street, but nothing recognized me." Far from the capital, the desert witnessed the longest migration Sudan had ever seen. People walked for weeks, then months, then even longer. Their footsteps carved temporary paths that disappeared with each windstorm. They walked barefoot. They walked bleeding. They walked with children tied to their backs. They walked with memories they could no longer carry. One group traveled 47 days before reaching a border. By then, they had no names left, only stories. A man in his 60s said, "I buried my wife in the desert so she would not be forgotten, but I feared the desert does not remember." Sudan's collapse pushed tens of thousands into places that were neither countries nor camps, forgotten strips of land between borders. No laws, no governments, no promises. People lived between nations the way others lived between breaths. Aid trucks drove past them because they were not technically inside. Governments debated whose problem they were. To the Sudanese stuck there, the world felt like a locked door. A mother said, "We live in a place that belongs to no one, so the world pretends we are no one." While Sudanese people suffered in darkness, a quieter war grew abroad, a war fought with hashtags, misinformation, propaganda, and political denial. Governments accused each other. Exiled leaders blamed everyone but themselves. Powerful nations played chess with a dying country. The truth became a casualty before the fighting even stopped. A Sudanese activist in Europe said, "We scream every day, but they only hear us when it suits them." In every camp, every abandoned house, every desert caravan, the children of Sudan grew up under an endless night. A generation raised without schools, birthdays, toys, or beds. A little girl who had never seen electricity asked her mother, "What is a lamp?" Another asked, "When will the sun last a whole day?" And another, "Why doesn't the world come?" No one had answers. Only silence. Yet, in all this darkness, Sudanese hope, fragile, flickering, stubborn, refused to die. A doctor restored a medical clinic using only scavenged tools. A group of teachers turned a ruined mosque into a school. Young men dug trenches to bring water from a distant source. Women formed night patrols to protect the children. And elders kept telling stories so the culture would not vanish with the villages. In the middle of a war designed to erase them, the people found ways to remain, to resist, to remember, to survive. In the final scene of Part 10, imagine this: a dark Sudanese sky, stars hidden behind smoke, a quiet desert lit by a single lantern, a small group of survivors sitting in a circle, a grandmother telling a story, a child falling asleep in her lap, and a single flame refusing to go out. Even when the world is blind to it, Sudan is still breathing, still fighting, still alive. This is the country that vanished, and the people who refused to disappear with it.